particularly aggressive deck, but it's just Highlander Priest.
Yeah, it is just good, and purple still does have decks that really struggle against Paladin, even though Druid... It's funny to see that we haven't seen Aggro Druid in so long, and yet players are still giving it its due respect.
Yeah,
and
sure.
It turns out Living Mana is still a good card, huh?
It is indeed. And we were talking about this beforehand because it feels like the real powerhouse in these matchups against purple's slightly slower, more control-y decks would be something like Divine Favor for the Paladin, which could now be very impactful. Or maybe Living Mana, something like that for the Druid, which is now banned out of the way. But in this particular matchup, while I would definitely call Weifu the favourite because he has a much higher chance of locking down board control early on, purple's got a very nice way to get things going here.
Right, absolutely. Going first with Mana Worm, there's just no better way to contest an aggressive deck of any sort that goes wide, and we saw so many times yesterday that Mage has such a hard time clearing multiple 1-health minions. It's not like they can spend every turn pinging, and even so, Paladin can develop more than one at a time, and Weifu goes for the full keep here. And really interesting, I like the Righteous Protector keep for sure, because it is a pain for the Mana Worm to deal with that.
So you're thinking just going wide on the board early with minions is good enough here, and you don't necessarily need to be looking for call to arms, things like that?
Yeah, I feel like this early few turns with Righteous Protector and stuff to back it up, like having Direwolf behind the Protector is such a powerful combo. Makes it so that he will absolutely have something to do in the early game. And going wide is just fine against Mage. Call to Arms, you definitely have time to draw into it. And even if you don't, I feel like this could be enough to get him there. However, Mana Worm is the biggest challenge on turn 1.
It is indeed, and it makes it kind of difficult for Weifu here because, as you said, getting the Righteous Protector down, maybe with a Veteran on this turn, presents a pretty big wall to the Mana Worm. But in that instance, you're not saving the coin to go in combination with the Juggler on turn 2, maybe getting a ping right away. Do you like going as aggressively as possible for board control right now, or do you think the coin could have been better later on?
No, I really like this because if you go in just with one minion, the Mana Worm plus ping is suddenly super strong. You still leave a Mana Worm on board, and you leave, even if you can play extra minions, the Juggle isn't guaranteed onto the Mana Worm, and maybe the Mana Worm ends up trading up. This way, if purple decides to go for trade and ping, Weifu can still clear it off. I actually was thinking if it was actually the Argent Squire over the Acarus Veteran there, because if you expect Mana Worm ping, that puts the Mana Worm to 2 health, in which case your Direwolf can buff up your Argent Squire and get the full trade. This way, if the Mana Worm trades, it goes to 1 health, and then you're wasting damage.
I guess this is an expectation, however, that maybe they go for Arcanologist on turn 2, or Sorcerer's Apprentice, or Medivh's Valet, in which case the buff from Direwolf could be really nice to take out this Mana Worm, and it's kind of worked out that way anyway, as purple decides not even to attack.
Definitely what I mentioned there was for a very niche situation. What actually we can see on board represents something that, just one of many possible outcomes. So definitely not wrong there from Weifu.
Absolutely. And here for purple, while Counterspell doesn't have many targets against this Paladin, the ones it does hit are ridiculously strong. If you could deny a Call to Arms, a Blessing of Kings, maybe even a Divine Favor if you're full on cards, you can just completely destroy one of the most powerful turns. So for Weifu, all of a sudden, his Call to Arms, which was going to be his power swing turn on turn 4, is just gone.
Right. The interesting thing is that on this turn, Weifu's thinking about explosive runes, right? So if he thinks it's runes, he'd love to go for one of the Divine Shield minions. However, that means that Juggler would go next, and he gives up the juggle possibility. So if Weifu values getting the wolf to survive rather than taking a very uncomfortable trade into the lackey, then he would go for Juggler plus Divine Shield minion first, but it feels really awful to lose Juggler to an Explosive Runes, especially when you're looking to follow up with Call to Arms. So I can respect this line of play for sure.
I definitely prefer this line of play because, it's unlikely that it's Explosive Runes, but there's a chance that it is, and it's only a 50-50 chance with the Knife Juggler to even hit the Cabal Lackey anyway.
And I think that Weifu, seeing that it wasn't a Runes when he played the Argent Protector, realizes that it's probably Counterspell then, so he's not going to be playing Call to Arms next turn, so there's no rush in playing the Juggler. So I think it's very good ordering and reactionary play from Weifu here.
Well, he'll have realised that it's not only not an Explosive Runes, but also not a Potion of Polymorph, which Purple is actually also playing to try and combat against those Warlocks, which he is so heavily targeting, but once again, not even in Weifu's lineup.
Yeah, and I'm actually not sure if this Call to Arms just never gets played. Are there other spells in Weifu's deck? I guess Blessing of Kings. Yeah, it seems like
it's
that and
Divine Favor. Yeah. That's the thing that's going to proc it, because without Hydrologists in your deck, there's really nothing cheap that you want to play into it.
Sure, and that essentially delays it forever and ever, because we don't see that spell in hand, and even so, both those spells cost upwards of three mana or more. So, yeah, it's very much going to be some slow turns for Weifu here. He still has minions. He did draw patches, sure, but a lot of the time this is enough to get there against Mage. So it's up to Purple to find, I would say, some good AoE to deal with this early board. Arcane Explosion is it.
That is absolutely fantastic. The mana reduction allows a complete board clear, because that Knife Juggler, without that removal, was actually going to get really out of hand.
Yeah, this is exactly what Firebat was trying to dig for in a previous matchup yesterday when he was playing Mage versus Paladin, and the fact that it's there for Purple is so huge. We forgot about Lost in the Jungle. That's the perfect draw for Weifu, because now he's able to get cheap activation.
That is actually just the perfect draw. You're right.
Purple does have Firelands Portal though, so still looking really good. I guess he just jammed that at the Wolf right here. Maybe proc off the Divine Shield from the Squire.
Yeah, the Venomancer is fine here, because the Poisonous, I mean, you could just ignore that and it would be like, all right, just because it's enough to kill off pretty much anything that comes down from Weifu.
Yeah, it's not the best minion, but the fact that it can just deal with little guys, it has high enough health to take down 2 or 3 of them, and enough attack to do so as well. Can't really complain, since Purple would be doing a lot of trading anyway.
And so here for Weifu, while Divine Favor isn't a particularly good draw, it's going to get way worse if he gets it at any point later in the game, outside of a Luneth being drawn, at which point he's probably lost anyway. So it's kind of nice for him to get it here and get the value while he can, and actually get a potential Corridor Creeper activation in the next turn or two.
Right, it's a really nice draw here, and good ordering from Weifu to not attack with the patches just yet before drawing. So I guess that's the game plan for Weifu here. That 2-5 is going to be super annoying, so he's going to hope to clear it off with, I guess, some lucky juggles. Otherwise, it's a very easy solution to a Corridor Creeper.
It's true, and just that little bit of value from his own Corridor Creeper could very well just push him through to complete board control. Assuming he can play around these explosive runes well enough, there's not really all too much gas left for Purple whatsoever.
Yeah, the thing is here that Purple's potential draws are so much better than Weifu's, right? Aluneth, second portal, so on and so forth, whereas Weifu running a bit on fumes here, and the explosive runes is actually something that I'm not sure how to best play around it here, because if you give up your Creeper, well, that's your last decent threat in hand gone. If you give up your Juggler, though, and play the Creeper, well, it's still kind of dead to the Poisonous.
Yep.
So maybe it just makes sense to play out the Creeper because it'll be less health. But then again, Rallying Blade just makes everything cleaner here. Yeah,
it makes it all a lot simpler here. And going to that point you were making about Weifu's draws being so much worse, they're not... I don't think they're actually that much worse. Now that we've seen the Call to Arms being played to thin his deck, a fair few 1-drops being played already, things like Valinir, Tarim, even Leroy a little bit later on down the line, there's a fair few decent draws left in his deck. So it's not dire completely, but I agree. Purple does probably have the advantage going forward.
Yeah, I guess it's just second Call to Arms that he really wants to see here, and second Creeper. Don't think Tarim's going to be doing that much work, because from this point forward, Purple can ping minions 1-1 if they come out just from the hero power.
I mean, it's just a 3/7. That's not the worst at this point in the game.
But it's definitely not something you just want to be doing on
I suppose.
Given that Weifu obviously has to clear the Poisonous to make room for the Corridor Creeper, and then he of course played the Juggler to trigger the runes. This is kind of Weifu's last push, so it's on Purple to draw something like Aluneth or Firelands Portal, although Fireball isn't bad at delaying the damage from Weifu.
Yeah, he can just clear the board and make this a pure top-decking war at this point, because neither player is particularly in burn range, so it's just about who can draw the better things first. And in this instance, now the Explosive Runes is down, the next draw that Weifu gets is kind of just cancelled out if it's a minion. So something like Tarim might be okay because it can absorb most of it, but even then it's just destroying one of your biggest minions. So It's kind of just all on these players to get the best card they can as quickly as possible.
Yeah, this is a pretty hilarious situation if you look at it. I mean, we saw a lot of this yesterday, aggro versus aggro. A lot of the times both players just run out of stuff to do. All the interesting stuff is pretty much done already.
Yeah.
But Purple getting the advantage here with the Kirin Mage. Then again, it dies straight up to a Rallying Blade. So what's it going to be? Divine Favor is super dead for WeiFu here, so I'm thinking Call to Arms is the name of the...
Oh!
Man, do I regret saying that?
Oh my god, yeah.
Call the call, man. Oh,
Even
and we
then.
actually are out of minions. Then.
So that's a pretty good sign, I guess. The only cards he can get now left in his deck cost 3 or higher, or is the one remaining lost in the jungle, I guess.
Yeah, and double Blessing, double Maul, Leroy, Tarim, and Valinor in the second quarter creeper. So that's actually all pretty decent.
Pretty good here.
Unidentified Maul strikes me as a pretty good draw here if you can get Divine Shield, because suddenly these minions take 2 turns to kill off instead of 1.
And this is the power
okay.
of this deck. This is what Call to Arms does. It thins your deck so much, and it means that although you're playing, as you said, a deck that's light as a feather, you can just get these kind of situations later on where you're drawing so well.
Yeah, okay, let's be real. WeiFu probably drew the best 2 cards he could have as top decks in that order.
Fair enough.
But it's not over yet for Purple. He can still get Glyph into Flame Strike, Fireland's Portal into...
That's a card.
A ton, yeah.
Glyph into Pyroblast on the next card.
Yes, that is the other out, sure.
Yep. Or he's got an Ice Block still, so just burn a couple of turns in a row could very well close this out for him.
No, well, it has to be, because you can only draw one at a time. So, yeah, from this point forward, and he does not run Arcane Intellect.
He does not, I believe.
So it really just has to be Glyph into Pyroblast. Or Glyph into Tome, into Block, blah, blah, blah. Stranger Things. All right. That is not it. So WeiFu is going to take the first match very neatly.
He is indeed. The aggro paladin coming out on top for him there, as I was kind of expecting. It was closer than one might expect, but actually, given how it was actually looking after the mulligan, the mana worm start with the glyph, all those really nice cards to get things going for Purple, you could very easily have seen it going his way. But I think for the most part there, very nice play from both players, playing around the secrets well from WeiFu, put him just in a position where he gave himself the ability to top deck so well because of those Call to Arms.
Right, I think both players showed really great knowledge of how the matchup operates, and that is you're usually fine as the mage going getting rid of your hand and the paladins. If you're going 1-1 and top decking, usually the mage will come out on top. So Purple played to that out. Just didn't pan out the way the decks were shuffled, let's be honest. But for WeiFu, on the other hand, he played the paladin a little from behind at the beginning because the mana worm came down, and yet he found ways to value trade and make sure he got the board back, which put him in a safe enough position that he could survive past a Pyroblast in 10.
And I guess in the previous series where Firebat was playing right at the start of the day, he was keeping a Luneth whenever he could against the most aggressive matchups. And in Sitch, I was saying maybe you should consider a bit more heavily going for those super aggressive starts to lock out the early game. But there from Purple, we saw a very nice aggressive start, and it was just the effect of not having a Luneth that meant he couldn't get to the rest of his deck.
Right, it is such a risky keep, but it just seems like whenever you don't keep it, it's exactly what you need.
Exactly.
Just like so many other cards in Hearthstone.
That's always the way it feels. And I suppose now that we're running, in general, Tempo Mage decks that don't have Arcane Intellect, it makes even more sense to keep it just because you're so all in specific matchups to having it.
I must protect the wild.
Right, so Purple will be moving on to the Jade Druid that I'm such a big fan of. It's got the Bone Mares and the Corridor Creepers, so I guess you could call it, I don't know, bigger green men.
Bigger green.
Because they not only get bigger from generation, they get bigger with Bone Mare buffs.
Oh, right, okay. And they also have big purple worms. Purple worms and green men.
Yeah, purple and green. Very interesting color combination. Anyway, WeiFu's got the pirate start here. South Sea Captain, super effective against druids, especially when the rogue is on coin. Unfortunately for WeiFu, Purple had the Jade Idol start, which means that even if Purple wants the Wild Growth on turn 2, it's that minion is able to trade away Patches or Swashbuckler, which is more correct, obviously.
Fortunately for Weifu here, though, there is no ramp available for purple.
Yeah.
But yeah, if he can find something like a Wild Growth on the next turn, maybe a Jade Blossom in a turn or two, he can ramp up to these Jades much more effectively. But at the moment, it's looking like it's going to be a tad too slow, as Weifu does go with the Swashbuckler here, thus pulling Patches from his deck and massively limiting the power of Captain.
Does it really? Because if he coins out Captain, sure, you get a value trade, but then I feel like the Burglar gets to push as much damage anyway if you expect a Wild Growth.
Well, I'm thinking it could lock down board control better, taking the value trade onto the 1/1 with the buffed up Patches. It's worth considering.
Sure. It's only weak to Wrath, so yeah,
Right.
It does make a lot of sense. But I guess Weifu didn't want to risk drawing Patches that turn, so now he's got pretty weak of a turn. Really don't think it's worth doing anything but daggering here, because he wants to be coining out that Elven Minstrel.
Yeah. Or even outside of that, he might just want to be coining out that Bone Mare a turn earlier to really start locking down the early game.
Wow, he's actually going for a straight up SI7 face. All right, let's do it. It's going to work out for Weifu here because purple just doesn't have the answers. But honestly, if Weifu doesn't pick up something cheap to start really activating these combo effects like a Shadow Stab, Backstab, even Firefly, then Elven Minstrel's going to be offline for a while. But that is a cheap card right there.
And I think I can actually agree with this line of play from Weifu because he has a perfect 2-3 curve with the SI, the Captain, and then the Tiger, which he got off of the Burglar, so that then he can afterwards start to redraw cards with the Minstrel and then start to look for things like the Leroy if he's closing in on lethal, or the Scalebane and the Valspines if he's not.
Right, and purple here, gonna play a Purple Worm. Not quite as cheap as he would want it to be, but it still does a good job of contesting the board. It just goes to show that even if you don't get even half of the discount possible on Carter Creeper, it's still very effective of a card.
Yeah, it's still just nuts. And Weifu looking like he's gearing up for the Keleseth here, which obviously the benefit, you played Keleseth in the early game, you're going to be buffing up everything you've got from now on, but it's significantly less stats to be throwing on the board than the Tiger.
Right. The thing to think about here is anyway, so you're giving sort of a better value trade because in this instance, the Carter Creeper removes still 3 damage if purple is just looking to remove as much damage as possible. So I don't mind the Keleseth there.
Yeah, I can see the reasoning for it. I think it's very close because the Tiger, yeah, you don't really want to shuffle it back into your deck either. So I suppose this does make the most sense, all things considered, assuming you get some cheap draws that you can actually get the benefit from Keleseth off of.
Right, and purple making a very straightforward play, and the Jade ramp is starting to, get really significant now. He can curve into double Jade Behemoth over the next 2 turns. Maybe Malfurion if he'd prefer to, but I don't know. I like the Behemoth train every day of the week. And Weifu doesn't have that many good ways of coming back against a board that he's behind in. Sure, he can draw into more value, but you don't want to be reacting as Rogue.
Yeah. And now he's going for the Tiger going for the Minstrel over the Tiger again on this turn. And in this instance, I'm not sure if I can agree with it quite so much, because the extra 3 health would actually make quite a big difference on this board, I feel.
Yeah, the argument for that is that not going for the Tiger gives him draws into better minions, because the follow-up to the Tiger would have been just, well, then you do the Elven Minstrel turn, and maybe there's still bigger minions, and the problem persists. So I think Weifu has drawn himself into better options in the form of Scalebane and Deckhand because he played Elven Minstrel, so I don't mind it. And recognizing that he is meant to go for a face here makes a lot of sense because purple's minions are now to the point where they can easily contest Weifu's.
Yeah, very easily.
Easily get the value.
Especially when you're playing a Creeper for 0 here as well.
Oh my, this is really just showing why this card shines so much. And in this build, where Jade Druid usually didn't have as much game against aggro before outside of spreading Plague, Carter Creeper really provides a way to just, make sure you have something to contest.
I mean, in a way, it just makes up for the lack of mana ramp here, because, you can't spend as much mana on big stuff, but if the big stuff costs 0, you don't need any mana to play it out anyway.
Right. It's got Wild Growth built into it, or Innervates or something like that. So, what a card. Just finding new ways to praise Carter Creeper every cast.
Praise be.
So Weifu really having to take a reactionary play here. He is able to play a decent-sized minion that is slightly awkward for purple to deal with, but honestly, if you're purple, you are fine still. wonder if it's just Malfurion for Beetles and push face for 9.
Yeah, looking at Weifu's list, he's banning the Warlock, so obviously not running Spellbreakers to get through that taunt at all. And yeah, outside of that, there's not really much that can be done because, yeah, say a Vilespine does come down, even then there's still a taunt in the way.
Yeah, and he could follow up with Behemoth and Wrath anyway. Okay, let's say the world is he goes for the Beetles and then the Cobalt Scalebane trades into a Beetle. It's still at 5 health, so you take the trade that you would have wanted to have anyway with your card or Creeper.
Good point.
And then if a Vilespine comes down, it can be cleared off by the 4/4 plus Wrath. So I really don't mind this. You can just get in the free 9 damage now instead of taking a really, really ugly trade or slow turn.
Yeah, I like this line of play a lot because this Malfurion...
Ooh, for poison.
Wow.
Even more interesting. So this really opens up not too much because if Bone Mare comes down, then the poisonous can deal with it. Purple is saying, sure, I can take 10. I'll be at a 7 still. I can armor up every turn. And this just makes the game end a lot faster for Purple.
It's true, and it is worth pointing out, however, that against the vast majority of decks, he would be completely... Actually, no, he's worked out perfectly, because I was going to say the Cold Blood in Weifu's deck could potentially close this out, because it's not that popular anymore. It would still be 1 damage off lethal with Leroy Cold Blood, so he's figured out, to the single point of health, how aggressively he can use his life total here.
Right, and he's fitted in right before Leroy's Shadow Step could be activated as well.
Absolutely. This is great from Bill.
Yeah, this is insane. Completely showing such deep understanding of the game and all of Weifu's options. I can't think of a punish here outside of what? SI7s, and even then you're just forcing a reaction. It's not even a punish.
Yeah, exactly. You can then just follow up with Jade Behemoth, and if they're not playing anything too big like a massive Edwin or Bone Mare, you're pretty fine anyway.
He's worked it out perfectly. So now that means that Purple, despite taking some face damage, will be able to have the easiest trades up of his life. The buff not even going on the 1/1 to make it slightly awkward. So yeah, I think Purple pretty much has this locked up. He can just take 3 value trades, play down a Behemoth, and I wouldn't even mind going for face for 3.
Yeah, I think I can respect this a lot. I was looking at maybe the Wrath for drawing, but the thing is you don't really need anything all too much on the following turns. Wrath will be a good card in its own right on the very next turn. He's literally just thinking about how do I possibly die? Is it worth going for armor? And he again realizes there's no point being afraid. He knows exactly what life totals to be playing around, and there's nothing he can die to.
Yeah, the only things he should be scared of, if any, are the 2 Swashbuckler picks from Weifu, which are Tiger and Druid of the Swarm. And the most burst that Druid could get anyways, double swipe. He still survives through that.
Yep, double swipe. Maybe Savage Roar with Leroy, but even then there's a taunt in the way, so yeah.
You must attack the minion with taunt.
Thanks, Inky.
Wait, what is this game? So, yeah. Purple's worked it out perfectly. I guess Weifu, his only option here is to go for Druid of the Swarm for taunt and then Astral Tiger. And neither of those are even able to challenge the Jade Behemoth, so there's no way to get rid of this taunt, and I believe the game will just end next turn.
I think you're probably right, and this is actually what is making me agree with you with that Jade Druid is actually just really good at the moment if you build it in the right way. For Purple here with the Corridor Creepers, I think it's doing a great job of targeting both the aggressive decks, as we saw here, giving such strong board control, but also just applying so much pressure against the priests that they can't manage to come back in the later stages of the game.
Right, then Purple not quite finding the lethal, but he has a Wrath draw for it. Even if he doesn't, it's very, very much inevitable.
Yeah, on the following turn with Ultimate Infestation closing the game, 100% protecting the taunt as much as possible correctly. So, no Vilespine, there's no cheap silence effect you could get from a Swashbuckler, and they've both been played anyway, so...
I wonder if... Yeah, I don't know why Purple was playing that turn so slowly. He saw both of the random effect cards, randomly generated cards, so yeah, it makes a lot of sense just to go for this. Nothing that Weifu can possibly do.
Such a high amount of damage here, but just that one all-crucial taunt
one
protecting
green,
Purple.
not quite a man, it's an elephant, but that one green elephant spoiling the whole party for Weifu here. So that is going to be game 2 in favor of Purple.
Purple's decks, that was, for him, maybe not necessarily the easiest deck to get a victory with against aggro, but it's not a bad one either. The Tempo Mage very possibly will struggle most of all, because it's just not going to be able to lock down that early game board control, which it really requires to get that face damage in later on. And as for the Kazakus Priest, we know that Purple is a very proficient player with probably the best deck in the game.
For sure. In terms of difficulty, I'd like to say that perhaps the Priest is easy mode, the Druid is normal, and then the Mage is difficult, expert, master level to try and get a win with. So Purple's got kind of the middle ground matchup out of the way, and he's a player who really doesn't care about queue order in a vacuum, but he mentioned that in these live lands, when you're not online, you can do something to when your opponent's hand is visible and your own hand, not your hand of cards, but your actual hand is visible, you can kind of do a bait and switch with trying to make movements as if you're clicking to switch decks and things like that. So Purple, none of us understand what's going on in this guy's head truly, but he's got some of those mind games in mind, so I feel like there's a million different reasons for whatever deck he chooses to queue up next, but we cannot speak as to what those reasons are.
So you're saying the reason Virtual thinks that Purple is the best player in the world is not because he's good at Hearthstone, but because he will randomly click before every match to try and confuse his opponents.
Nothing to do with skill or recent performance.
Right, I'm sure that's absolutely
because those
correct.
are definitely mutually exclusive.
But here for Weifu, with his Kazakus Priest left and the Rogue left, only actually one aggressive deck left. So although overall he's got a very aggressive lineup, I suppose we're assuming somewhat incorrectly that it's just aggressive decks left. Whereas for the Mage now, because it's Kazakus Priest, which is not a great matchup for the Mage, but not awful, and the Rogue, they're both fair matchups, but not when your opponent gets that.
Yeah, would you look at that? Even the Glimmer Root.
Even the Glimmer Root.
The only thing you're missing is Kazakus here. So we're going into one of the most classic matchups of the recent few metas. I'd say like 50% of ladder games you queue are this. The ever so fabled Raza Priest Mirror. And one player has drawn the nuts. The other has drawn, well, stuff that could potentially draw into the nuts.
That's true. And here, Purple making a play that is worth pointing out, fairly vulnerable to Potion of Madness, but at the same time he sees that 2 cards were kept from his opponent, which means neither of those would be Potion of Madness. So maybe he's thinking, I can just make the read that he doesn't have it, and he does end up being correct. And get a good amount of draw to get things going, and some very fantastic cards to have drawn at the same time.
Right, and at the same time, I feel like this play he's just made is playing around Potion of Madness, because if you don't play the Engineer, if you're going to potion the Thalnos and bump it in the Cleric, that means the Cleric is at least damaged, so you can get draw out of it.
Very good.
Whereas if you played Engineer, the Thalnos can go into that, no problem at all, no damage. So it's kind of a halfway between play, and we were talking to Purple a lot last night, me and Lorinda, if playing Cleric on 1 makes sense, and Purple says it really heavily depends on what your hand is, and the way that Purple's hand panned out, it's a bunch of stuff to draw. I can't wait that long. My opponent kept 2 cards, so Purple is definitely playing to that kind of hand.
Absolutely, it's for 2 reasons. As you said, only 2 cards were kept from his opponent, and he doesn't have any of the cards that you can keep to really abuse the Cleric's draw ability, like Wild Pyro, Circle of Healing, stuff like that with the Binding Heal to draw through your entire deck.
What? Easily.
So Weifu, do you like the Priest of the Feast here? I don't see why you wouldn't just play ahqWei, because Priest of the Feast, I feel like it has higher value to be worth saving for sudden heal in case something really, really wild goes wrong. Whereas ahqWei, if you're saving it for something, it's usually an aggressive deck for Circle of Healing combo potential.
Yeah, I think I can agree with that. The 5 versus 6 breaking point of health, not really going to make too much difference at the moment. They both die to pain and not much else. And losing the Priest of the Feast here, if Purple is able to go for not a high tempo start, but at least reasonable, getting a bit of chip damage, the healing for Weifu is actually massively mitigated now.
Yeah, and Purple's hand, if you look at it, it's only really missing Raza. He's got Anduin, he's got Valen and Radiant, which could easily pick up damage soon. He's got Auctioneer for additional draw, and of course Kazakus just to be Kazakus. So definitely close to even with these players. Of course, the power of Raza plus Anduin, everything in Purple's hand put together doesn't compare to that.
It's true, but it's not that far off as he picks up Raza, and all of a sudden, he has to just be in the driving seat after the Raza and Anduin combo is completed. Purple's got a way better hand.
Yeah, we've got a game on our hands, and now I'm looking, it looks like Purple's favored just between all the stuff he's already drawn to make the damage happen quick and furious. So can Weifu Psychic Scream here to prevent the Raza coming down? I don't think so, because these stuff have all come from Purple's deck and he's already drawn his Raza.
Yeah.
So Weifu can think, though, if Purple hasn't drawn his Raza, which you could reasonably assume because it's been turn 6 and it hasn't been played, so it would have to have been a top deck.
Well, then if you draw Raza, you only have one Raza left in your deck anyway.
Sure.
So it wouldn't
But then
cancel the effect.
it would negate a Kazakus if you drew.
Okay, it would.
But yeah, it's a little too cute. It's a little too cute.
You're not going to get a Roger effect out of that, sadly. And so the Circle of Healing being picked out. I like this pick a lot in this matchup because he's got most of the cards he needs, but not everything. He wants to be finding Kazakus, obviously. He wants to be finding Mind Blast, Radiant, to start delivering a true one-turn kill combo.
Looks like he's going to go for an Uber burn plan here. He'll be very sad to eventually find out that both Raza and Anduin are in hand for Purple, but something even like a Holy Smite or Mind Blast burn could be significant. Unfortunately, 2 useless cards burned for Purple there.
Dirty Rat being pulled is interesting because now his Velen is safe from something like pulling it out and then going for the Shadow Word Death. But at the same time, I can agree, fairly uninfluential cards being burned there.
So now for Purple, what is he looking for with his Shadow Visions? Like Shadow Word Death to deal with Raza? I don't feel like it's necessary if you're going to go for Anduin next turn. I feel like it's more on Purple to just get stuff out of his hand.
Yep, and also just look for things like Mind Blast and Holy Smite to be able to deliver that damage. I think that's what he's looking for most of all.
And he got it. So now, yeah, it's only a matter of time. Although Weifu can get his own Anduin online first, which it's very likely for him to do. He doesn't have nearly as many bullets for the machine gun, so to speak. That's Holy Smite pickup, though. And he does have Auctioneer. Yeah,
both players actually kind of do have a lot of stuff to be shooting towards their opponent's face, because the Radiant Elemental obviously helps Purple a lot, in addition to the 0-mana card of Silence. But Weifu's got the Coin, he's got the Velen and the Holy Smite to really just get going with all this damage.
Right, so giving up the Coin here means that Auctioneer is not too good, but it also just means you have your Anduin turn out of the way. It's also a really good board clear here if he trades in the Raza into the Priest of the Feast, fits in the Auctioneer Hero Power into the Cleric and bumps it in, and then plays Anduin. He can get the full clear between the extra hero power. So I'd be surprised to see something different, but is he thinking about... What is he digging for? Mind Blast? Or just...
I guess he's thinking he doesn't really want to give his opponent a clear board going into his Anduin turn, because you want to make them suffer a little bit in terms of what they're killing off, because obviously here can only kill off the Anduin, the Raza itself. All the other minions are sticking around. But having said that, it's barely any pressure at all.
Yeah, you are putting yourself one turn behind, but I guess Weifu just really values the Coin, which I can respect with the gadgets on hand. So that is, however, everything Purple could ever need in the world ever. He's only just 1 mana off from being able to play all 3 of Velen, Holy Smite, and Mind Blast, but he might not even need it.
He's got lethal next turn. He can do 24 damage next turn with the Silence, in addition to the Mind Blast, Velen, and the Hero Power. And with only the Anduin to heal him up, I think Weifu's just dead here.
Yeah, completely agree. Purple's done it. He's done it. He's drawn Raza and Anduin.
This was pretty nuts to see the same deck get the absolute perfect start on both sides.
Ooh, well, Purple didn't get the perfect start. I mean, what I wanted to bring up is that although Weifu had the cards in the opening mulligan, Purple made the conscious decision of playing Cleric on 1 into Thalanos on 2, holding back the Novice to play around Potion of Madness, and he was rewarded for that kind of play. So even though things did line up a little bit better for Purple in the end, it's not like he didn't deserve to get to that point with his early play.
I think that was a spot-on read from Purple to play the Cleric, because at first when this deck was made, it seemed everyone was throwing it down on turn 1, and then some of the pros started saying, don't ever do that. It's just always wrong in the mirror.
It's just bad.
Exactly. But in this instance, 2 cards were kept, and to be honest, he could just put both of those on either Kazakus, Raza, or Anduin, And then outside of that, he knows Pain or Potion of Madness is very unlikely to be there. So just going with the high chance that his cleric can draw a lot of cards, and it worked out for him in a massive way.
Yeah, it is super interesting to hear that in such a matchup that has been played time and time again, the mirror of Raza Priest. There's still some pro players arguing about whether cleric on one is bad. And Purple was just talking about this last night. We won't name a particular player, but he really went hard on reviewing one match about saying, cleric on bad, cleric on one has to happen, not playing it is awful, blah, blah, blah. And Purple's just like, no, you gotta look at the hands, you gotta look at the situation, you gotta consider all of the possibilities and mulligans. And Purple made the read perfectly on that game.
He did indeed. And now he's going to be left with the Mage deck. And the 1-mana 1/3 in Mage, whether or not you toss that down on turn 1, it's a little bit more simple, I think one might say.
Yeah. 1-mana 1/3. Do you mean Dire Maul in Mage?
Yeah, it's a new tech I'm trying out for the Beast synergy. Everyone says how good Mana Worm is on turn 1, so I thought, well, why not stick 2 more?
Mana Worm not have a tag? It's a worm. Does that make it a dragon or a beast?
It's dragon adjacent, okay. I think one might say.
So Weifu picking up an unwelcome visitor in his hand in the form of Patches.
Yeah, very sad way to get things going for Weifu, but in a way, although it feels worse to get Patches when you've got a bunch of pirates in hand, it's almost better because then you can just get the synergy with Captain going and get it a 2/2 charger instead. As Purple gets off to a very aggressive start, completely ignoring the value of the battle cry on these valets.
Right, he would love to have played an Arcanologist instead, but he completely understands the matchup in that if you give up the early board to the Rogue, your burn just doesn't get there most of the time because they can outpace you. So he's happy to play down a River Croc. Not happy, but I mean, he realizes it's necessary. So Weifu picking up Keliseth, which is of course not as strong now that Patches has been drawn, but you know, you're never sad about Keliseth on 2.
Are you saying that Medivh's Valet is like a River Croclus? Should it have like half a beast tag? Because it's got a monkey in the picture. So
true. That's so true.
It's halfway there.
Are we going to introduce half tribes now in Hearthstone? Yu-Gi-Oh! What is it? Spellcaster / something. Well, anyway, slightly awkward turn for Weifu here because if he plays the Captain, it means that the Arcanologist gets a value trade. At the same time, I feel like daggering up is super slow.
Yeah, I think you can just quite happily dagger it down on the turn after you play the Captain. Maybe with whatever you get off the top, hopefully another 1-drop, I guess, to go in combination with the Patches. Because, make no mistake, Weifu needs to find some more impactful cards if he's going to take this game, or he is going to fall so far behind.
I absolutely think you are right. And now for Purple, I think the name of the game is being able to activate Medivh's Valet for the most effective swing turn possible. So does that involve trying to find a secret off the Primordial Glyph? Because Potion of Polymorph very likely will just be procced on the following turn. Or does it mean saving Polymorph plus Valet for the same turn?
I think I like this line of play because you're getting the ability to get a secret off Glyph right now, and you're also buffing up the Mana Worm at the same time.
Yeah, and if he picked up a Frostbolt there, it actually would have been super insane, taking the board back completely. Although a secret is not something you can complain about either. But I'm thinking the Blizzard is actually really interesting.
Wow,
here,
okay.
Too. Not necessarily good, but if you're in a situation like the Mage has been in so many times where your opponent goes wide and you have nothing to answer, they just don't play around Blizzard is the thing.
I don't think I agree with the Blizzard pick necessarily, because I think as you're going into turns 5 or 6, not much is going to die. And because of that, the freeze effect probably isn't too valuable because you have a very small amount of burn in your hand. And because of that, probably the Frozen Clone in order to activate the Medivh's Valet, because no matter what you get, it's not that bad. Just anything to throw down is fine.
Yeah, I can see that. Might be Patches, though.
I mean...
But sure, it's still...
not awful.
Yeah, Patches will still be like, what, 1 mana 1 damage.
It's just Stone Tusk Boars then. Obviously, it's terrible when you draw it from your deck, but if you just generate it, it's not the end of the world.
So definitely a respectable pick for Purple there. Do you think he plays it down this turn or just goes for ping and clone? I mean, clone Valet or just ping and clone? I like the ping for sure.
Yeah, I like the ping for sure. And then you could go for Frozen Clone on this turn, because then even if it's activated, which it very likely will be, you can just go for Polymorph Valet on the following turn, or even Polymorph Crystal Runner if there's nothing you particularly would like to hit.
So Weifu picking up a convenient activator for Minstrel. He didn't really want to just play the Patches out like that. So he's definitely refilling the board to a respectable size, as you so often say. And I think the pickups here matter so much. If he can get Chain Gang or Bone Mare, that could really, really snowball the game in his favor.
Yeah, he just needs something to push his advantage at the moment, because once the spells start coming down, he may just be pushed off the board, but there's just not that ability right now for purple. So Bone Mare in Eternal 2, if he can stick this board, will be so influential for Weifu.
Right, so purple finally getting to go for the Valet swing turn. And for Weifu, if he doesn't pick up something more decent than the SI, I feel like he might be in a bit of trouble, but honestly, I don't mind just going for a coin double. I mean, just play out 2 SIs here. You can get just more value the other way around, but it is slightly weaker to an AoE board. But he did see the primordial glyph generation, so shouldn't be too scared about that either. This just goes for more value. I
think if there wasn't a secret up, I would definitely agree with your play of double SI7, because it's so likely that that is either a potion of polymorph or an explosive runes. You don't really want to be throwing the bigger minion into it, I don't think.
Very true. So for purple now, I'm thinking this Crystal Runner's got to come down one way or another. So do you like Mana Worm, Firefly, Frostbolt in tandem with it?
You going for the Frostbolt on the 4/4?
Yeah, it seems like... Yeah. Well, it depends, because you're looking to play Fire Lance in the following turn, so it depends on how the trades go down. Because if one of your Flame Elementals or Mana Worm would stick, then you could take that trade. Looks like purple just prefers to go wide, though.
I think with this line of play, you can see he's saved every burn spell in his hand.
True.
So he's hoping there's no Bone Mare here, because if there isn't a Bone Mare, clearing up this board completely, or at least denying all damage to face, is kind of difficult. But at the moment, if he can just connect once to face with this Crystal Runner and then get in a bit of damage with burn, if he picks up an Ice Block, he is in a respectable position, I would say.
True. He's got, 14 already. You can fit in at least 2 or 3 more pings. And if he expected to get the Cabal Crystal Runner through, he just would need essentially 1 more Fireball. However, it's not going to work out exactly the way he planned it, but Fire Lance into a decent minion could still pull him out of this situation.
So Weifu going very aggressive there, putting all his half on 1 minion and sending that face. Do you agree with leaving up the Crystal Runner here, or would you have preferred buffing something else up and maybe taking it out?
Kind of like going for this line, actually. He did see Potion of Polymorph already and 1 glyph card, so most of the time the mage has to throw burn into this. Of course, it does make sense to remove minions, but I feel like there's something to be said for racing the mage as well. With Leroy in hand and possibly Greater Arcane Missiles burst, I can get behind it.
I mean, Greater Arcane Missiles is pretty good in this instance, no matter what happens, because either it goes to face, great, you can just kill him with Leroy in the next turn or 2, or it kills off a couple of minions, you can play out the Creeper no matter what. Seems pretty strong. Yeah,
the damage cutoffs are really great, because even if it just goes once on the Cabal Crystal Runner, you have the Firefly to clean up. Corridor Creeper can come down pretty conveniently right after. Like it. Or they can just go all... Wow. Not quite. I was so excited, but... okay, I feel like that is probably one of the worst outcomes, because you really want to be getting rid of Mana Worm.
It's true. I think it's not that bad, though, actually, because the amount of spells that Purple's going to play here that he wouldn't have played already is probably quite low.
Sure.
So it's probably more damage being picked off of the board. And it's setting up for so much damage on the next turn or 2. Just one of these big minions needs to stick in order for Leroy to just win the game.
Yeah, he's already got 9 between Leroy, SI, and Dagger, so... I think it's over unless this Fire Lance pulls a taunt.
It's got to be a taunt or a charge, I believe, in order to pull this back for Purple.
Purple? And that is completely...
That's neither.
That's not a bomb squad, I'll give you that.
It's not a bomb squad, yeah.
But it is one of the worst outcomes.
Yeah, but unfortunately for Purple, when you're dead, you're dead. So bomb squad or not, it makes not a lick of difference. And we are going to a 2-2 series, 5 games in this series to decide who will be going into the semi-finals.
Even buffed, I forgot about that as well. So he only needed patches to stick. So that means Yeah, as you so eloquently stated, it's gonna go to a game 5 and wouldn't have had it any other way because Purple's one of those players that even if he's got kind of unfavored lineup, he will find those ways to get as far as possible.
He will indeed. And I think actually having watched more of this series, we were overstating how unfavored he was because for Firebat, it was undeniable with all the spiteful summoners and not even a Kazakus Priest in his opponent's lineup. It was just too aggressive. But here for Purple, banning away the aggro Druid, there are only 2 real aggressive decks left, and the Rogue isn't necessarily all that aggressive in terms of damage early on.
Sure.
So he had a good amount of time to start wrestling back with his Druid to take a victory against that. But now with only his Mage left against the Priest, who do you favour here?
It really, really depends. The Mage can get off to such an incredible start, notably with Kirin Tormage and to a secret that just really, it's such a pain for the Priest to deal with if they don't have cheap spells to proc counter spell. Kirin Tormage can get in really early for a bunch of damage, so if Purple can hit that curve, well, it's already a given that you want Mana Worm on 1 and so on, then the Mage has a good chance, but then again, Priest, in its arsenal of many, many different tools, has a bunch of healing available to it, and that so often can negate the Mage's, one of their major game plans, which is burn.
That's true. So for Purple here with his Mage deck, what cards is he going to be keeping and what's he going to be throwing? Are these Cabal Lackeys as 1-drops good enough to keep in this matchup?
I really think you want Mana Worm. Yup, Purple agrees. And WeiFu's just been drawing Raza and Anduin pre-mulligan every Priest game so far. This is some kind of magic down. I mean, maybe you need to be an MC to draw this well.
Oh, right, okay. This is his MC hot dog sick flow shining through.
Right. So Purple's hand not looking too shabby either. Sorcerer's Apprentice is actually kind of decent in that it requires a Holy Smite most of the time to get rid of. It can challenge a Cleric, and it just goes in for 3 every turn.
But as for WeiFu's hand, does he keep Anduin? Is this aggressive enough of a matchup that it's too late coming down?
You keep Anduin. Come on. I think he's just thinking about keeping Death, but for Corridor Creeper, but I know. Let's just go for the Kazakus. Let's go. Oh, wow, he doesn't.
Wow.
Okay, maybe I've not played enough of this matchup, but it seems unthinkable to me. What do you think about that?
I mean, the Mage can get off to ridiculously high power starts, because even though in terms of board control, they're not necessarily the premier aggro deck, at least in terms of the start of the game, in terms of raw damage they can push forward. If they get Kirin to a Mage or Mana Worm, it can be basically the highest potential there is. Sure,
you can very easily just not make it to turn 8. So a very ungreedy keep from WeiFu here. And you're right in saying that the Priest can pretty much just remove every threat from the Mage without having to get to an Anduin burn early game plan. They can just play control. But that's barring the possibility of an Alineth. So I feel like if Purple draws into an Alineth and WeiFu is, struggling to keep up with the onslaught of minions, I feel like that toss of an Anduin could really hurt him. However, that's still way too far off to talk about.
Very true. And here for WeiFu, this is why you start off and do all your thinking at the start of the turn. You need to think, no matter what I draw, what am I going to do this turn? Because now that he's played this Novice Engineer and drawn the Silence, Purple can put him on pretty much exactly Silence in hand. Because else, why would he wait this long to make the play? Unless he's going for some roping BM, which is very un-WeiFu from what I've seen so far. It's the only card he could have left that he would play.
That's true. You'd never think about Circle here and nothing else is playable, so that might be a very, very clear read for Purple.
I don't like using it here. I much prefer saving it.
Oh, yeah, same. Okay, what is this preventing? A secret?
It's preventing a secret. It's preventing glyph nonsense from coming down.
Yes.
But we saw a complete throw from Purple in terms of cards, so I guess maybe that makes it more likely that he has spells in hand, actually, because he would keep early minions and probably get rid of most of the spells at the start of the game. But I just think with Priest of the Feast, that's going to be so much more valuable later on.
Absolutely. And I wonder what it is in Purple's deck. There's 2 of it on the board, so I guess it must be Sorcerer Apprentice. Well, yeah, very easy Glimmerroot turn there for WeiFu. Pretty unfortunate that he didn't pick up a spell. I think he really would have wanted to see that in tandem with the Wild Pyro to clear up what is already becoming a very annoying board.
And here for Purple, he feels so happy tossing down this counterspell now because he's seen that Silence from his opponent's hand. This is the other reason to save it from WeiFu, because obviously looking at Purple's deck list, there's basically nothing you actually want to hit with the Silence, which is why he went for it. but just denying a counterspell, getting an extra activation with the Priest of the Feast or with the Wild Pyromancer, all of these things I think are way more valuable.
Right, and Weifu is in such an awkward position, and this is what we kind of talked about. Yeah, Kirin Tor, big deal. These are not quite mana worms, but they're dealing about as much damage that you can hope for a mana worm to do anyway. And Weifu with no removals, really unfortunate to not pick up some other cheap spells, although I do think it is a fault on his part to play that silence so early.
Agreed.
Means that purple can just keep not chipping away, just clunking away for 10 next turn.
Yeah, and I would say even if it was counterspelled here, that's just great for Weifu because it sets up for the Holy Fire. At the moment, he's got no other spells in hand, so that Holy Fire could end up being counterspelled, which would be game-losing on the spot.
Right, I think the only thing purple needs to be concerned about is the Priest of the Feast. Does he have the read that Weifu doesn't have any cheap spells that he would want to play to proc the counterspell to the point that you can leave up the Priest of the Feast? Well, you don't have to think about it when you get the Fireball, so that seems pretty straightforward to me.
It's kind of tough, actually, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you want to chuck this to face?
I really want to chuck this to face, but I guess, so what? It's whether or not you can play more than 2 spells before you're killing him. You're pushing in 6 to face, bringing him down to 15. The Fireball would bring him down to 9. You have no more burn in hand. You kind of need to rely on board control for another turn or 2.
Well,
yeah.
The thing is, the Fireball to face still doesn't get there, I think, because you can expect the Priest of the Feast to trade away a minion anyway. So it's kind of like you're only dealing extra 3 damage. I can see it if you know you're going to top deck another burn spell, but in this case, I feel like it's best to remove that minion that could possibly undo all of your damage so far.
I agree with you, but I love that Purple's taking his time here. I think it's very much worth considering because he's thinking, what draws change this? Can I get lethal on the following turn? You know, because I've got a counterspell up, does that change things? It's so much worth considering here. And now for Weifu, Raza on 5 is always a pretty strong turn. You're never too sad about it, but it's just pretty slow actually here. Yeah,
the way that the game has turned out, Purple just drew into minions that Weifu did not have the answers for, and that is something that Raza Priest, you always feel like they have the answers, but these days they're running some heavier AoE as big answers, Dragonfire into Psychic Scream into Anduin, right? But for the early boards, it's kind of more specific what they need to deal with. Something like 3-2s, like you need Pyro plus cheap spells, you need Spirit Lash or plus Pyro, something like that, or Holy Smite or Potion of Madness, and kind of unfortunate that none of those options turned up for Weifu, but Purple, props to him for recognizing that this was the game plan to just get him there.
And now for Purple, with 12 damage, I believe, available right now, he's thinking about how much can I get away with firing to face and how much do I need to trade? Because obviously the main thing he's afraid of now is Dragonfire Potion, but because that counterspell he has in play, I think he can feel fairly comfortable about just going face because of the fact that, Circle of Healing could proc the counterspell and then you follow up with the Dragonfire Potion. But because the Circle of Healing would have come down while the Priest of the Feast was there to proc the counterspell, I think he can be completely happy with not being afraid of board clears here.
Right, yeah, and you cannot put the Priest on having 2-card combos with so few cards in hand, so I think Purple has just won the game.
Right.
He's locked Weifu out of this. Can Weifu draw? Not quite. Nothing to proc the Acolyte.
The Holy Fire does nothing.
Yeah. That's insane.
That is mental. And for Purple, if he had had 2 mana reduction on every one of his spells versus 1, I don't know if it would have made any difference in this game basically whatsoever.
You're right,
the glyph into Fireball, it was so cheap anyway with the only 1 there. And maybe, obviously, Weifu didn't know that the second one was in hand, but it just really didn't make a difference in this game. And if he could have proc the counterspell here to play the Holy Fire, that is what could have turned this game around.
You're absolutely right. It was that one decision to use a silence a little bit too early that cost Weifu nearly the entire game. We could talk a little more about the Anduin Mulligan, which is a lot more debatable. But that silence play, I really think, just cost him a ticket to the semifinals, which Purple will be competing in very soon.
That's exactly right. This is why Virtual was saying Purple